The first element of the theater with a capital T we should address is the art of acting. Two components are necessary to create a theatrical event: the actor or group of actors working together to enact a story for a person or a group of persons receiving the story by witnessing the enactment. As the British playwright Tom Stoppard has one of his characters say in a play called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, a performance without an audience is just a rehearsal. Audiences are essential to the theater. Theater exists in the interchangeable connection and communication between the actor and the audience. All that being said, I want now to talk to you a little about acting, what it means, how it is done. I have been on stage in my past, and I tell you there is really nothing like it. Once you get over the nerves, etc., of exposing yourself to a group of people, if you become the character, it's the character singing, not you. It's the character crying, it's not you. But I'm going to tell you how that might happen, right? There are a variety of methods and teachings, but I like to think of it as a person taking onto or into him or herself another person. It's like a medium at a seance, going into a trance and allowing a spirit to inhabit his or her body. It's, to me, not becoming the spirit, but letting the spirit use me, my body, my voice, my attitudes, in order to live. Let me give you an example. The character of James Bond. We all know James Bond, I think. We can be safe in saying that everyone hearing this knows the character of James Bond. We have seen the films, we've read the books. We know he is an agent for the United Kingdom's Secret Service, that he has a license to kill, 007. He is a womanizer, he is handsome, virile, and he likes his martinis shaken, not stirred. These are the attributes an actor portraying Agent 007 must show us, or we won't be satisfied. Bond exists out there in the ether, and an actor is needed to bring him to physical life, to enact James Bond. In fact, he is so real to us that we never say, let's go to that Daniel Craig or Sean Connery or Roger Moore film, but let's go see the James Bond movie. Bond exists, but he needs to be conjured up, embodied by an actor. It doesn't matter who, as long as the actor portrays James Bond to the audience's satisfaction. This is true of Hamlet, or Willy Loman, or Blanche Dubois, or Doctor Who. Actors accomplish this by two ways of working it out, either from the inside out or from the outside in. Neither approach is better than the other. It's what suits the actor. It's always the actor's decision on how he or she creates the roles, the parts. So, we'll take Inside Out first. Here you delve into the psychology of the character. What makes him or her tick? Why does he or she behave in that particular way? When you have decided on these internal questions, you begin to try to move as the character, talk as the character, laugh as the character. After all, the theater is showing, and an audience can only work with what it sees in order to understand the character. You as the actor must physicalize the role. Eventually. Now, working from the outside in is the opposite approach, the one I usually use as it comes to me more naturally. You put the character up on his or her feet, as we say. You decide how the character walks, talks, moves, laughs. Then you begin to work out the psychology that underpins all these physical attributes you have decided upon. Remember, all art is a series of decisions made by the artist. You, as the actor, must provide and portray the psychology of the character through your own body. The Greek philosopher Aristotle called the art of acting simulated representation. I think that sums it up nicely. It's fake. Nothing in the theater is real. Even when we get to realism at the end of the 19th century in a few weeks, it's not real. Scenery is painted cardboard. Actors put on makeup and wigs and costumes and they become other characters, but they are still always themselves. There's a duality in an actor. Artaud, when we get to the 20th century, a man named Antonin Artaud, in a book called Theater and Its Double, will talk about that duality, that doubleness. Hamlet standing there going, to be or not to be, that is the question. Thinking, did I turn the gas off in the apartment before I left today? You exist as the actor, a human being in real now time, in the present, and you also exist as the character on top of it. That involves something called intention. Intention is often spoken of when acting a role. What is the intention behind your line reading? And often this involves the other actor. For acting is also about reacting, as it is in real life. Somebody tells you something, you react to it. So acting does the same thing, whether it's to the world around you, whether to its actual other dialogues, whether it's, I don't know, a remote control you can't manage. You know, oh, why can't I get this thing to work, right? You're reacting to that, the frustration of it, say, right? Now, I'm going to give you two examples, actually two lines said two different ways. This is a game you usually play sometime if you want to, when you're writing, when you want to emphasize a certain word in a sentence, you make it so that the word shows up. You put the emphasis on it, all right? So, two actors, right? I hate you, and I want you to get out of here. Well, I hate you, and I want you to get out of here. I hate you, and I want you to get out of here. Well, I hate you. You get out of here. The lines as written are exactly the same, but the intention behind the lines are different. Obviously, a decision has to be made here, a decision agreed upon by the actors and with the help of the director, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, the role of the director. An actor has to be in tune with the body also, know its strengths and its limitations. The body has to be as limber as an athlete and mentally prepared as a painter of portraits, for portraying is what an actor does. We portray people. In our daily lives, we are all actors. We act throughout the day. Test yourselves. You act one way with your parents, one way with your children, if you have any children, one way with your friends, one way with your boss at work, one way in the classroom. I'm your teacher. I'm dressed as a teacher, right? With a shirt and a tie. If we were in a classroom, I would be standing in front of you. You would be the audience. You would be looking at me. And I would be performing my role as teacher for you. Okay? And you would portray your role as audience by taking notes, by listening, by not sleeping and not coming in late. See, we're lucky we don't have to have a classroom, so you don't have to worry about that sort of thing right now. And as you have roles to play throughout the day, a child to your parents, a parent to your children, a worker to your boss, my Brooklyn's coming out, sorry, a boss, differing degrees of being a friend to your friends and acquaintances. That depends upon the level of the friendships, doesn't it? Your very close BFFs or whatever they are, right? Your closest friends are, you do act one way with them than you do just a minor acquaintance or somebody you know, the person you buy your coffee from at the little cart in the morning. You say hello to, how are you? But that's a different relationship, right? And a student to your teacher. Also, next time you are out and about, observe the world around you, the people. The theater is all about people. How do they react in certain situations? Actors often have to portray or physicalize behavior, human behavior, and then show that behavior to an audience who will respond as they do in real life. And of course, this, as the wedding depicted in the written lecture I sent you all, depends on the culture in which the actor is living. After all, we all respond to our various cultural attitudes and environments. Probably the only time throughout the day or week that you are actually not acting is when you are completely and totally alone. That's hard to do in these days of being shut up in the house with your families, right? To being alone. That possibly the only time you are not acting is when you're in the shower. You know, that kind of thing. When you are alone. Stripped, you might say, right? You see yourself. What do you see? Do you ever try to just actually analyze yourself? Nobody has to know you're doing it. Please. Nobody has to know it at all. Now, if you were playing you, how would you be? What would you do? What would you do as an actor to embody yourself? Acting itself cannot really be taught. That's my opinion. My opinion. You'll find out in this whole course I'm very opinionated about a lot of stuff. You can't teach acting. What you can do is teach the techniques of acting. And I had a friend one time who had to be in a play where, this was way back in my college days, where she had to perform it for like 2 months. And the director had given her this direction. Now, her boyfriend, it was a play called The Hostage, and he gets killed. He gets shot in front of her, and he dies. And he directed her to just stand there and look at the body and say her final speech. And she said to me, I don't know if I can cry or not 30 times in front of an audience. I said, well, why don't you try something? Why don't you, without asking his permission, because he did give you the direction. It's not important to me whether you, as an actor, feel these emotions. What's important to me is that you communicate the emotions to the audience who's watching you. I said, so one night, and you can use the excuse that you just have to get down, you just were so emotional you had to go down and hold his body. Get down as, get down close to the body. Get over the body. Make some appropriate noises and shake your shoulders. That audience will accept the fact that you are crying. She didn't have to do that a lot, but she did be able to do that when she needed to, because she didn't have the real emotion that night in whatever performance it was. This is where I'm talking about acting is a sham. Theater is a sham. It's a great lie. One day I always wanted to write a book called Theater, the Great Lie. But everybody knows it, but still. But to pretend that it's real, it's not real. What's real is sharing the space with the audience, being in the same room, telling the story from here to those out there. Now, movie acting is a little different, because movie acting, you're acting for the camera, and you're pretending that you're out there, that there are people out there. This gets me into this whole idea of presentational performance or representational performance. And you have to work this out with the director, right? I mentioned Hamlet before. Probably the most famous speech in all of William Shakespeare's plays is Hamlet's speech in the third act, where he contemplates suicide. That's what to be or not to be means. To live, to be, or not. That's the question. Now, you can walk out on stage. Hamlet's a very famous soliloquy, meaning he's alone and he's speaking his thoughts. In Shakespeare's day, he would have come out, looked at the audience, and spoken his lines directly to the audience. This is presentational work. This is presenting yourself as the character. But you come in and you just say, now I'm not a great actor, so bear with me. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take up arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. Now that's directly out. You see it in musicals all the time. People can start a love song this way, and then eventually holding the man and the woman holding themselves, or the man and the man, or the woman and the woman singing the love song, right? They will hold themselves in such a way that their faces are out. Now that a lot of it has to do with projecting the voice out into the auditorium, all those other technical things, which we will get into a little bit later on. But that's what we call technique. And then after the applause at the end of the song, they go back, maybe they go into the kiss, but they go back into the play. Now that's being representational, where you're acting, I say in profile, this way. You're talking to another actor standing over there. Now in a soliloquy like Hamlet's, he doesn't have another actor to talk with. So he talks to himself. We've all talked to ourselves. Please, in this little apartment, I've been talking to myself a lot. We talk to ourselves all day. There's another thing we do a lot. So, in that respect, you don't look at the audience. You keep it internal, even though you're speaking. And you kind of just think about it, and you might even look off into the distance. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take up arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. That's the two-way street. A lot of this has to do with how do you evoke, how do you become this other person? So why actors, sometimes you have to forgive actors because of that schizophrenia that's in their heads. We find out a lot of bad stuff about actors. They're drug takers, they're alcoholics, they're womanizers, they're screwing around all over the place or whatever. It's a very emotional life. And it's hard. And if you spend 3 hours or 4 hours on a stage being Hamlet, it's hard to come down afterwards in your dressing room. It's hard to get it out of your system. People always talk about don't bring your work home. Well, in acting, it's hard to separate it. And to rev up, to get into it, you warm up. You warm up doing exercises. You warm up doing your voices. La 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 la. La 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 la, right? That sort of thing. You warm up your voice, you warm up your body, you get it warm and pliable. But then you have to be able to control it. To know when to gesture, to know when not to gesture. Sometimes the gesturing just comes naturally. And that's almost improvisational. But again, that's organic. That comes out of what you're trying to create. And what you're trying to create is your interpretation of Hamlet. And it doesn't matter, man or women. I mean, the great Sarah Bernhardt at the end of the 19th century played Hamlet. There have been many women who've played Hamlet. I saw a woman named Judith Anderson played Hamlet. She toured it. She came to my college and performed it, and we all went to see Judith Heard. It doesn't matter. It's a classical role. Um, that's really all I think I have to say to you about this. It's just, again, to get you to start thinking about it. What is an actor? How does he do that? Oh, we're talking about movies. Yeah, movies and cameras work. When you're talking to a camera like I'm talking to you now, you're not here. I'm talking to a void. Actually, I'm talking to a green dot at the top of my screen, hoping I'm making some sort of eye contact after reading that little lecture I had to write it out. It's hard to talk about acting without having it all in your head and hit all the right marks. But, and in movies, you get to do it over again. Movies are like jigsaw puzzles. I don't talk about movies in the class, but we're going to talk about it here because get it out of the way, because that's your experience, most of you, or film, or by extension, television. These are electronic media. They are not live, even though they say live from Saturday night. It's Saturday Night Live, or the news broadcasts, right? Unless those people are in your living room, it's not live. It's broadcast. There's a thing in between showing it to you, and you're watching it on a device. That's why people make jokes a lot about the internet. You can watch on the phone a conversation with your friend who could be standing like 3 feet away from you, yet you're talking on the phone face to face in FaceTime. That takes away the liveness of performance. But getting back to the movies, the idea of taking it over again. You do a scene and say you have to do this, and then accidentally this thing drops out of your hand. Oh, cut. Take two. You do it again and again and again. Also, Meryl Streep can cross the soundstage, and the camera could follow her, and she opens the door and walks out. Right? 3 months later, in another day or whatever, they now shoot the scene where she's walking in to the room. Movies are put together by the director and the editor. It is an image-making. You don't even need dialogue in a film because you get real close to actors' faces and all. And acting has to come down. You have to bring it down a little bit. Where theater is bigger. I had a friend of mine one time who talked about microphones in the theater, and I was objecting to them because I have a very loud voice, as maybe you can figure out now. And I'm thinking to myself, he said the famous line to me, without a microphone, you can't be subtle. And I said, who said the theater has to be subtle? The theater isn't subtle at all. The theater is in your face. It's loud. It's not sitting like this. It's sitting like this, aware and up. And it can be very broad. We'll see in the Commedia dell'arte, in the Italian Renaissance, it's big gestures, etc. It's bigger than life, like most art. It's not little and minuscule, because nobody will ever see it otherwise, So, there have been experiments about how to do that more closely, acting scenes with a audience members sitting right next to us, that kind of thing. But those are just experimental things to do. So anyway, I think I've spoken enough and given you enough to ponder this week about the origins of theater and about acting. So I'm going to stop here. All right? Give the lecture the read about the origins and storytelling and ritual. Very important basis. And this is the first thing, acting. All right. Next week, we move on to the theater of the ancient Greeks with a little prelude about ancient Egypt. And the videos, it may not be me speaking, but it's going to be about writing plays, playwriting, putting the dialogue on the page, telling the story through words alone, and actions. Theater is always about showing. In a novel, you can say, and she ran up to him and stabbed him, and he gasped and fell to the floor. That's a stage direction in a play. In a play, she grabs the knife, she runs across the stage, she scares him, he goes, and he falls down dead, right? Only action. So ponder all of this. I'm trying to open these doors to you. All right, so thank you very much. Have a good week, and see you next week. Ciao. Stay well. Be well.